Hi, Frankie.
Hi,
How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
Good. You are so welcome. I'm so excited that we're having this chat. Um, and I don't think I've had a health professional on, or definitely not a doctor. So I'm really excited to kind of have a conversation about health where it relates to women, but also in a daily life capacity.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm excited to get into it. But for anybody that might not know or might not have come across your profile or your podcast before, do you want to give us a little bit of an intro into who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. My name's Dr Frankie Jackson-Spence. So I actually wear many hats. I am still working full time as a doctor. I work in cancer research and clinical trials. So my day job is basically investigating why people develop cancer and also conducting clinical trials to try and improve treatments and outcomes for patients. I'm currently studying a PhD, so I do lots of kind of academic medicine and writing lots of papers and things like that. But kind of alongside that, whilst I was treating these patients with cancer, and I really started to question why some people developed cancer and others didn't, and also why some people did really well from treatments and other people did not so well. And I kind of then became interested in more of the lifestyle medicine. So we have, this is going off on a slight tangent, but we have our genes and they are heavily influenced by our environment and how we live, and that's called epigenetics. And I've just become increasingly interested in on that. And that kind of led me to social media because the stats for how many people go to social media for health advice is staggering. There was a survey conducted in maybe 2012, so I'm sure it's worse than this now, but it was 40% of young people under the age of 25 go first to social media to get health advice when they have a problem. And so I felt a real duty seeing how much misinformation and lack of evidence-based advice that was being dished out. I felt a real duty to step into that space. So my educational platform, which is at Dr Frankie JS, kind of grew from there, and I post what I hope is accessible but relatable health advice that really bridges the gap between what I'm reading and what I'm seeing in clinic with the average everyday person who wants to live a healthier lifestyle. And off the back of that, I work collaboratively with lots of companies and corporate companies, brands, and I also host my health podcast, Vision of Health.
Yeah. It's really interesting about the stats because I know there's also a lot of stats around people not going to the doctors or not calling about something when they're sick or when they find something that might not be normal to them or whatever. I guess, in your opinion, why do you think people are turning to social media? Obviously, it's easier, it's more efficient, but then, like you said, there's so much misinformation out there. But why do you think the main reason is?
I think there's two reasons. The first is that it's digestible. So I could direct you to a really great source of information on something common like urinary tract infections, but it requires a bit of effort for you to read the article and then apply it to your case. Whereas on social media, obviously, a lot of the content is short form and you get a smiley face basically telling you it. And I found this so much in COVID actually, because I posted a lot of advice and basically was just breaking down the daily talk about what the government was suggesting into accessible, like relaying in an accessible way. And I actually don't think I was saying anything different. I think people just like a friendly face behind it. And so I think it's convenience. I also think on one hand people are afraid to go to the doctor because they are afraid of what they might find, but I also think people kind of like the drama of social media and how some things are really sensationalized and like people are really dramatic about it, and I think we kind of love to hate that.
Yeah. I think the thing that worries me about social media and health, and we can get onto or what you think is the worrying thing about people going to social media and self-diagnosing as it be, is that health topics trend. And that worries me because then ADHD, for example, at the moment, and think of it what you will, and I'm sure everyone has their own opinion on it, but it's trending at the moment because people are talking about it and then people are self-diagnosing and then those people are talking about it and then it becomes this thing that great that everyone's speaking about it, but everyone are self-diagnosing by it. And I think it worries me as just someone who's not a health professional. So what's your kind of view on that?
I'm really glad you said that, because there's good and bad with everything. If I think about my time online over the last 10 years, let's break down some of the health topics that have been trending. Lots of nutrition related health topics trend. So we've had fats are bad, carbohydrates are bad. We've had recently seed oils are bad, plant milks are bad. Now we've got that gut health and plants are great. We've got people more openly speaking about women's health and hormones and menstrual cycle and things like that, which is brilliant. And we have people really talking about things that, used to be taboo. Someone saying previously I have ADHD or I have anxiety and depression was very hush-hush 20 years ago. And so there are good and bad of it. What I think you've touched on there, and I completely agree with, is the kind of there's nuance with all of these topics. So when you go to the doctor and you display symptoms don't necessarily mean a medical diagnosis. So no one's doubting that your symptoms may be real, but there are lots of things involved with making a diagnosis. So there is your medical history, there's the symptoms and signs you present with, there might be an examination, there might be some further tests. And so the issue with self-diagnosing with social media is you don't get the rest of that. You also, as much as people may think they do, are not actually qualified to give a diagnosis. And so they really shouldn't be doing that. The risk is also that you misdiagnose or miss something more serious. And I see this a lot with kind of gut health topics, because people might think, oh, I have IBS. But, bloating can also be a symptom, or change in bowel habits can also be a symptom of lots of other conditions, potentially more serious, like inflammatory bowel disease or ovarian cancer. And it's actually really important to not only go to the doctor to get your diagnosis, but to rule out those other things. I think we also need to be aware and conscious of the impact a diagnosis can have on you. So in some ways, you'll hear people talking really positively, I finally got a diagnosis of this symptom. Everyone thought that I was a difficult child, or I've really struggled with this, or I really struggled to focus in school, or whatever it may be. And having that diagnosis and having an explanation for that is really helpful. What I think is difficult is, if we use kind of anxiety and depression as an example, you might be exhibiting symptoms or going through something and it meets the criteria of anxiety and depression. Now, is that truly an anxious or depressive disorder, or are your symptoms potentially a natural reaction to something you're going through? And I fear sometimes that having a label then to say, oh, I have anxiety, you then could potentially approach things and think, I'm an anxious person, I have anxiety, I'm not going to deal with this well. Whereas actually what it might have been is you were going through something stressful and anxiety provoking, which was kind of to be expected. And that doesn't necessarily affect your resilience to something else. And so that's where I really want people to be conscious of what they're consuming and what labels they're taking on when it's potentially not from a truly educated source.
Yeah. And also there's the point of that in how I might take a self-diagnosis of being anxious or having anxiety and depression might be completely different to how you react to it. It could send me spiraling, and it could, you could thrive from it. So it's that side of things, and the mental health side of things is also quite worrying when words like anxiety and depression or gut health, or it could be anything that is a symptom or a diagnosis of what you're feeling.
Yeah. I think there are some positives to this whole conversation as well. People are really taking responsibility for their health. I think looking at kind of like Gen Z, they're going to be healthier than ever. We're talking about our gut health, we're talking about our mental well-being, we're talking about the importance of exercising and weight training, and we're more conscious of the environment that we live in. And so I think there are positives to it. I think we just need to almost be educated on how to consume the information when it comes to our health. I think as well, you lack background to the situation the person giving you the advice is in. So I always think health is much more simple than people want to tell you on social media. If you, for example, go and get your nutrition advice from a qualified nutritionist, that's a brilliant source of information. But also you have to remember they're a qualified nutritionist. So much of their life is revolving around food, education around food, access to things. And that might not be potentially applicable to your situation. So you might follow someone who says, take eat all these things or take these supplements. And, there's something to be said for they have easy access to those things, often sent things that can be very expensive. And it's like the creme de la creme of the highest standards and the perfection to do with that individual health goal. Whereas for the everyday person, taking just a bit of their advice would be useful, but not necessarily at all. And I think people really beat themselves up because they think, well, I'm not eating exactly like them, or, I do cook a bit, but wow, their meals are really plant diverse, or wow, they're really, like not eating anything out of a packet. And I think you also have to just remember that you're not a nutritionist, and so of course your life is not going to be quite the same.
I'm laughing because my friend stayed over at mine a couple of weeks ago, and we were watching What I Eat in a Days.
Yeah.
And some of them were nutritionists, and they were great meals, but they were ridiculous meals. The average person do not have time in their day to make these like flamboyant 3 meals in a day, but they were loads. And then we were just laughing at that, because it is about balance, and it is about having a realistic approach and an approach to food or health or fitness or whatever you want that revolves around you and your lifestyle and your goals. And someone with a husband and 2 kids and works Monday to Friday 9 to 5 is very different to me, for example, who has no children and lives in the city, and my lifestyle's very different. And so it's about tailoring bits of information for you, right?
Absolutely that. So that nutritionist or that person who was creating that video, you have to also remember that that day were making content. So they probably thought to themselves, I can spend 45 minutes preparing breakfast because this is going to make a great piece of content. And it is a breakfast that I eat sometimes. But do I eat these 3 meals in the same day? Probably not. And realistically, we probably have 5 minutes to prepare breakfast. And there's certainly things that I like. You can take tips, like adding seeds to your breakfast or something. I've seen that in loads of videos from nutritionists, and I think, you know what, I might have a yogurt pot and I can quickly add a bit of that on. But can I prepare eggs every morning? I could get up 10 minutes earlier, but do I really want to? No. So I think exactly that. Take inspiration, but don't compare yourself to this unrealistic standard, because everyone is living a different life. And the whole idea, and I say that as a creator as well, the idea of my content is for you to take snippets, not to replicate it. And that's where I think people go wrong.
Yeah. I did want to talk to you about that and the kind of the pressures of living a certain way or certain lifestyle. Or I know we had a bit of a conversation before we started recording today about you don't need to be someone who is running every day or in the gym every day to have a healthy physique, for example. And so what are your thoughts and opinions on exactly that, I guess, people thinking they have to live a certain way to be healthy, or what they're seeing on social media they then have to take and replicate in their own lives? And I think it comes with an immense amount of pressure, and I think we all feel it at times.
I could speak for hours about this. I'm so glad you asked that question. So the first thing is that health looks different on everybody. And really, what you look like has very little to do with how healthy you are. So if I give you an example of a magazine cover, you could see someone on the front of a fitness magazine that has a really ripped body, really glowy skin, really shiny hair, and you think, wow, they're really healthy. But questioning that, we don't know what they eat. We don't know whether they smoke or they do drugs or they drink loads of alcohol. We don't know what's going on with their hormone health. We don't know what's going on with their gut. We don't know what's going on with their mental well-being. So you really can't see healthy. You can feel healthy. And so if you're embarking on this health journey and you're adopting health habits, and it's really kind of, you've had to overhaul your whole life, so it's kind of unsustainable, it's probably not that healthy. Social media will lead you to believe that you need to be going to the gym 3 times a week lifting weights, or you need to be going on long runs. I do love going running, but you don't have to do that. Or you need to be going to an expensive gym class or something to be healthy. But actually, from a physiological perspective, any form of movement counts. So that could be 10 minutes run. Where did this whole arbitrary value of having to do a 5K run come from? For your body, like, shorter periods of exercise are just as good. And kind of ignore what we're seeing. I think the message should be, I need to move my body regularly, but it doesn't have to be in the way you're seeing.
Well, I guess social media is almost, it's like anything, like there's the old saying, like, social media is a highlight of somebody's day, not a representation of it. And I guess it's the same with fitness. It's kind of a luxury lifestyle version of somebody's approach to fitness or health or diet or whatever they're talking about. And so you do only see, you know, if I'm going to the Pure Gym and then tomorrow I'm going to a block yoga class, I'm going to picture block yoga, aren't I? I'm not going to picture Pure Gym, for example. And so, it's just taking that and making it realistic on what's for you.
And I think there's some takeaway messages, you know, we need to look as well when we talk about these health parameters. So if we broke it down into exercise, nutrition, sleep, stress, exercise, for example, it's all good and well as showcasing these fancy gym classes and the form of movement we choose to do, but actually how active you are in your whole day is important. So if you're someone who currently does no exercise, the thought of having to give up 3-4 nights a week to go to the gym is totally overwhelming. There's probably things in your routine in your evenings that you already do and so would have to get rid of to be able to go to the gym. So it's going to be a huge shift, which is totally unsustainable. If you're someone who already goes to the gym 3 times a week, adding in one more session is probably not that difficult. But if you do none, adding in 3 or 4, totally overwhelming. So for people who are in that position, I would recommend making small changes that are actually easy to do. So is it that you maybe can't commit to going to the gym, but can you go out for a 10-minute walk before you leave for work in the morning? Or can you walk home from work instead of getting on the bus? Or can you schedule in a gym class with a friend so that you're doubling up your socializing with your training and it makes it fit into your life better? And start small, because once you've built the routine in, it makes it very easy to make changes. Yesterday, I was really sore and I didn't want to go to the gym, but movement is in my morning routine. So instead of going to the gym, I went for a walk for half an hour. So the routine was already there, which made going for the walk easy. Because I had this gap in my morning where I usually do some sort of exercise. But if I normally got up and went straight to work, fitting in an hour's exercise is going to be really difficult. And it's the same with nutrition, like another really important foundation of our health. If you currently do not cook anything from scratch and you're always grabbing on the go, or you're, buying ready meals that you pop in the microwave, maybe saying, on a Saturday or Sunday night when I have a bit more time, I'm going to cook from scratch and I'm going to make double portions so that 4 meals that week are home cooked, rather than thinking I need to make all 3 meals a day from scratch super healthy. And it makes it easier. And I think the problem is everyone is trying to sell you something. So people need to be aware that they will make you a problem to sell you a solution. It's actually really simple. You just need to it's easier than it looks, and it almost sounds too simple that you think it can't be that easy, but it really is.
Yeah. What is balance? Or your version of a healthy balance?
I think it completely depends on the person and their environment and what they're interested in. If you have someone who's super sporty and their entire life is revolving around that, their version of balance is going to look very different from someone who's, got children, working, fitness is an interest but not their whole life. And so balance is going to look different for everyone. I think for me, balance is when you're not having to give up anything you enjoy. If you're someone who enjoys socializing, you enjoy eating out, you enjoy alcohol, you enjoy a bit of sport, you enjoy doing really well at your job and you want to maybe work late some nights, you enjoy watching TV, you've got balance when you're kind of dipping in all of those pies. I think you're unbalanced if you're having to give something up. So I can still be healthy and go to a Pilates class on a Friday afternoon and then meet my friends for a pizza. To me, that's balance. And some people might think, well, you're just undoing all your hard work.
Well, I think that's where, and I've definitely gone wrong here, and I've tried to be too perfect and have everything too in line, and then you lose balance but actually what I thought I was doing, I was trying to gain balance, but I wasn't, because I was being restrictive of certain things, and therefore that pulled away from my happiness, because I felt empty in areas where I felt super full in others, and it wasn't I wasn't living like a true reflection of what I wanted to be.
I think that's quite normal at the beginning of a health journey. Because if you think about when you first get into anything, your enthusiasm and your excitement is there. So when you first join a gym, you think, gosh, I'm now spending this amount of money per month on the gym. I'm really enthusiastic about it. I'm going to go all the time. And then, you know, your life changes. You realize you've got different priorities, and somehow you've got to make this new habit fit into your life. So I think it's relatively human and normal to have that sudden burst of kind of eagerness at the beginning, and your balance might be a little bit off. You might think, you know, no, I can't come out tonight. I've got to go to my new expensive gym class. And that kind of should wean off. In terms of the whole like restricting attitude, I think to some extent you do need to restrict, because I love pastries. I literally love nothing more than a coffee and a croissant. It's probably not the best breakfast choice for me to have a croissant every single day. So to some extent, I need to, you know, resist the croissant every day. And I might say 2 times a week, I'm gonna let myself have one. That's not unhealthy restriction. Unhealthy restriction is when, even when you then let yourself enjoy it, you feel guilty. And I think that's a careful balance. And again, I think people kind of get that wrong at the beginning, and then you learn.
It's so easy to fall into that trap, though, isn't it? Of eating something that wasn't on the plan or wasn't in the diet this week, and then you feel crap about yourself all day.
I think it's also a lack of understanding of general energy balance and kind of nutrients. You need to look at your diet as a whole across the week. So if your diet is the majority composed of nutritious whole foods, kind of 80% of the time, the odd thing like that, or slipping up for one meal out of a whole week, really doesn't make a difference. And I think having that understanding means you can just move on from it. Be like, okay, yeah, I had pizza for dinner tonight, but tomorrow I'm going to have lots of vegetables. That's totally fine. The issue comes is when people think, okay, well, I'm off the bandwagon now, so I'm just going to eat rubbish the rest of the week.
Yeah. I'm glad we've started talking about this, because what I wanted to lead on to was consistency, and how I've been able to be consistent was reducing the restriction and allowing things like pizza in my diet, or croissants, or even lattes. Like, I never used to drink lattes, and I love a latte, or chocolate or whatever, and being less restrictive and actually enjoying what I'm doing. And like you said, not feeling guilty about missing the gym if I didn't have enough energy that day, or whatever it was. How do you because we did mention also then the enthusiasm of when you do start a health journey, or you start to take a bigger interest in what you're eating or your movement a little bit more, and then it can soon dwindle down because we go at things so hard that it's not maintainable, and then you're like, shit, what do I do now? I've burnt myself out. What is your advice on remaining consistent when it comes to health?
So I guess my advice is to make small changes and to not do this big overhaul. I don't like New Year's resolutions, because you really, you know, in between Christmas and New Year, when you are sitting around the house with nothing to do, you could start exercising then. There's nothing to stop you going on a run or going on a walk or cooking a nutritious meal in that time. We don't need to wait till Monday or a new year. And I think the changes we need to make are smaller than you think. I'll give you an example of sleep. Anyone who follows me or starts following me from this will know that I talk about sleep all the time. I think it is the number one most neglected pillar of our health. And I could preach and say, we all need to be sleeping 7 to 9 hours each night. Okay, great. Everyone knows that. How can we actually implement that into our lives? Well, if you're currently sleeping 6 hours, there's no way you're going to suddenly have 2 hours extra per night to start sleeping 8. So what can you do? You can add in 20 minutes. You could go to bed 10 minutes earlier, and you could get up 10 minutes later and just have your bag packed and save you a bit of faffing time in the morning. Scientifically and physiologically, that is going to make a positive difference. We need more awareness and more kind of external validation. People telling us that these small changes are enough. I think that's where we lose sight of this. If you currently are very sedentary, going out for a 10-minute walk is a step in the right direction, and it is going to make a difference. You know, swapping one chocolate bar a week for some fruit, or some nuts and seeds is going to make a difference, but we think it doesn't, and we think, well, that's not going to help, so I may as well do nothing. And that's where people go wrong. The changes you need to make are like, I don't know if you've heard of this kind of 1% change every day. There's a book I read years ago that, I hate saying this, it sounds so cliche, but it changed my life, called Atomic Habits. And it was basically how you can build habits into your life. And it was make these small, easy changes. So I'll give you an example. I made a commitment to myself that I was going to be consistent with supplements. That's a whole nother story about supplements, but that was my own personal health choice. So in the morning, I always make a coffee, and I will sit and scroll on my phone or something when the coffee's machine's doing its thing. And now I've stacked the habit of taking my supplements onto making my coffee. That's a really easy change that over years is going to make positive health changes. We just need to make it easy. So I would encourage anyone, this is a little exercise people can do, write down the health parameters you want to improve, whether that be exercise, nutrition, sleep, stress, whatever it is, and think of something really easy you can do that's a step in that right direction. Is it walking for 10 minutes more a day? Is it going to bed 10 minutes earlier at night? Is it, instead of buying your lunch out and ending up with a supermarket meal deal, are you just going to make extra dinner the night before and bring that into work? And try and pick one from each thing. That's really easy. And then once you've got that nailed for a few weeks and it's actually in your routine, then change something else, rather than these big overhauls, because that is where people kind of fall off with it, because they can't sustain it.
Yeah. And I do think I now crave healthier stuff because I don't have as much junk or chocolate or pizza or whatever in my diet, and so, but I enjoy those things when I want them, and it's such a treat when I have them, but I don't crave them anymore. Like,
and isn't that such a wonderful feeling to get to? It's such a it's a journey that so many of us have been on, and I think it's so much to do with the environment we were brought up in, where we were told these things were bad for us. They're bad for you if you're eating them all the time and it's all you're eating. So a chocolate bar or a pizza amongst a really healthy, varied diet, in someone who's active, in someone who's managing their stress, and in someone who's sleeping enough, really is not making any difference. But if you're someone who finishes work late, they're really stressed, they go to the petrol station and they get an oven pizza and they do that 4 nights a week, there's some improvements to be made there. And I would agree with you that the reason you don't crave it anymore, there's a little bit of science behind kind of the sugar theory, and the more we eat, the more we crave. But also mentally, if nothing's off limits, you don't really want it the same. If you allow yourself to eat the foods you want regularly, your mind doesn't think, oh, I need to binge on them. Because I used to be like that, admittedly, at university. I might kind of, on a Sunday with my friends and housemates, you would have, I don't know, maybe gone out on Saturday night. On the Sunday, you think, oh, let's have a bit of a lazy day, and you order a pizza, and I think, well, I need to finish this because tomorrow I'm being healthy. Whereas now I might think, oh, well, you know what, I'm full and I could eat those 2 slices for lunch tomorrow. Whereas old me wouldn't have let myself eat pizza for lunch on a Monday.
What changed?
I think I just realised, I just got it. I just realised that you can be healthy and it's not as complicated. I don't know if it was the kind of behind the scenes of social media when I realised that these people that were claiming to be perfect actually weren't, and they were actually eating all these things as well. But also, I just got more, educated on what health really means. And many people think they're being really healthy. They go to the gym for 2 hours a day, and they come home and then they're sedentary for the rest of the day, or they're eating, protein bars instead of fruit because they can track the macros on them better. That's not healthy. And I just think it was just education about that. I think most people get to it. I just wish people would get to it sooner, and that's where conversations like this come in.
Isn't it funny what we tell ourselves about other people and other people's diets, though? Because there's a PT at home that I'm friends with, and I just thought he was this guy who worked out all the time, has a perfect life because he's PT and he looks great and he's a really nice guy and seems really well balanced. And he was walking down the street the other day with this huge packet of chocolate eclairs.
Yeah.
And I was like, what are you doing with them? And he was like, oh, my diet is so bad. And the same, like, he was working out in the morning, then he'd do his classes and his clients or whatever, and then just lay at home all afternoon eating absolute shy. And I was like, huh, you're supposed to be the epitome of health. Like, that's what I thought you were doing. And so it is funny because that's just a small example, but we do tell ourselves all the time that people on social media, or I bet some of your followers think, you know, Dr. Frankie is a doctor and therefore you talk about health a lot and you've got a podcast about health and you talk to nutritionists and whatever, therefore you must have this perfect balance of life and you never eat chocolate or you never eat croissants.
I know, and I actually think some people are surprised about this when they get to know me. Like if we went out for lunch now, I'm ordering what I want, and if that is, you know, that's probably not going to be the salad. Some days I might think, oh, I've not really eaten enough fruit and veg today, I'm going to pick something that's a bit more nutrient dense. But
when you have a balanced diet, your body can crave that. Like it craves the veggie.
And I think for me, I really enjoy the gut health conversation at the moment. It's something I became interested in when I was at medical school, so in sort of 10 years ago, and we were really kind of just scraping the surface on it, and we just didn't know what we know now about the importance of a plant-rich diet. And now I'm super into this. And so I look at what I can add into my diet. So, for example, if I order a pizza out, I've ordered so many pizzas out on this podcast. That's my example for everything. But I might now order like some vegetables or a salad to go with it. And it's more thinking, okay, this meal doesn't have any plants in it, so I'm going to get them from that. But it doesn't stop me eating the pizza. Or I might think, I don't know, I might buy some chocolate, and I also might think, okay, I'm also going to buy like a little nut thing to go with it. And I just understand my nutritional requirements now much better. And I love that the gut health narrative and the conversation has been around what you can add into your diet, you know, like what can you sprinkle on, what color can you add to a meal, and I think that's a really healthy approach to nutrition. For the first time, we're not focusing on what we're removing from our diet. Now, if I make like an avocado on toast, I'm crumbling a bit of feta on top, or I'm adding some herbs or some seeds or some chili flakes, all to add plant points in. And it's so refreshing from the era that I grew up in, which was weighing your avocado and putting it on MyFitnessPal. Gosh, aren't we away from that?
Yeah, it's restriction is. I think about some of the things that I've done and it's just ridiculous, isn't it? I've actually never thought about the gut health conversation about adding rather than taking away. You're right, it is really refreshing.
Yeah, it's a good one. I think it's one that's a great starting point for anyone who wants to improve their diet. Think, how can I feed my gut? And when you realize your gut is this kind of like living, essentially, for anyone that's listening that doesn't understand, in the gut we have this population of bacteria and microbes, viruses, yeast. There's more bacteria, I love this quote, there's more bacteria in your gut than there are grains of sand on all the beaches in the world. So when
one person?
Yeah. So, and everyone's looks different. So when you're eating, certain foods will ferment and they will feed the gut microbiome. So that's things like prebiotics. So that's all your plants. So if you eat a broccoli or some other green leafy veg or something, it basically gets your intestine a little bit undigested, it ferments, and then those chemicals feed the gut microbiomes. So you've taken nutrients from the plant and your gut microbiome has. And then there's another food group called probiotics, which are like live cultures, things like yogurts and kombucha and all these fancy things you get, which have live strains in that kind of add to the diversity of your gut microbiome. And so when we're eating now, one small change you could make is with every meal think, okay, so I want to eat this, how can I also feed my gut? A bit like your pet. Your gut's now your new pet. It's your Tamagotchi.
I love a Tamagotchi. Tamagotchi comes up in so many conversations.
Really? I thought I was being original there.
not on the podcast, but yeah, it's just a bit of a throwback. But yeah, I guess, yeah. And it's almost like, what advice would you give to someone about their diet if you were if you were thinking about yourself as a third person, for example.
It would always be what you can add in. And I think when we talk about what we can add in, you automatically take things out. So if I said to you, okay, when you're picking your lunch after this, pick something that's going to be healthy for your gut, the thing you're going to pick, or add more plants to it, you'll probably then be more fulfilled, fuller for a longer period, and you probably then won't reach for the sugary snack that you might have done had you picked something that was a little bit less nutritionally dense for lunch. And so you naturally cut things out. If you've eaten loads of vegetables with your meal, they're quite filling. So you'll actually be quite full. So then if you want something sweet, which so many people do after a meal, you might eat less of it. And it's kind of, instead of focusing on what you're taking out, focus on what you're putting in, and the coming out will just happen.
I think you've got a point there on. It's about, or for me it is anyway, about being fulfilled in what you're eating. Yeah, I've never actually thought about it like that, because then as a result you end up eating less, or you reduce the binging or whatever. So many people binge eat. I've had a lot of conversations about it on the podcast, but
I'm simplifying. Binge eating is for some people, binge eating is a true eating disorder. And there's a lot of components of that, and it's quite a complex issue. There's psychological elements and things. So I'm talking very simply for the average person who hasn't got an actual disorder in that sense, but has binge eating tendencies. And it all comes from that attitude of, I can't have this tomorrow, or labeling it as bad, so I better get the badness out of the way quickly. It's the same actually, even with alcohol. The alcohol conversation is interesting now because so many young people aren't drinking, which is great. It's funny because our attitude towards alcohol tends to be bingy as well. We're going out on a Saturday night so I can drink, but I'm not letting myself drink Monday to Wednesday or whatever. So again, actually what people would be better doing is we know it's healthier for the liver to have it spread out rather than all in one go. So in all aspects of life, we need to move away from the binge eating. And if I give the binge eating analogy to exercise, we binge exercise. We go to the gym and then we sit on our desks all day on our phones or whatever. In the evening, we sit on the sofa and watch TV. And so we're very sedentary in the rest of our lives. Whereas actually, you could probably get away with not going to the gym if you increase your activity throughout the rest of the day.
Let's move on to talking about health and fitness and lifestyle when it comes to females. There's a lot of conversation at the moment around cycles and how our body changes, and I think it's quite interesting to learn about that. There's a lot of education. I've been to a few talks about it. Let's talk about kind of fluctuations in us and our bodies as women. And I think the cycle conversation is interesting, but also, I don't know about you, but my body has changed so much throughout the different stages of my life, from when I was 17 to when I was 22 to when I was 24. And I feel like being a woman, your body constantly changes and constantly evolves. Yet we try and stick to the same cycle and routine of diet and movement. So what's your kind of advice or opinion on that?
So firstly, I absolutely love that the female health conversation is going on so much at the moment, because I'll take a slight tangent, which is not like me, but female health, if I ask anyone what they mean by female health, usually we resort to talking about our reproductive hormones or female related health conditions like gynecological disorders. Actually, female health is its own entity in terms of, heart disease affects men and women very differently. And so female health is just health in a female. And I really think that's what we need to appreciate. It is not just our hormones and tracking our menstrual cycles. So that's the first thing. When it comes to how our hormones can affect us, we have been taught from a young age that the most important part of our menstrual cycle is the period. It's literally the least interesting part of the menstrual cycle. Our hormones fluctuate in different phases.
Actually taught, I don't know about you, but I mean,
you were taught, you're taught, you're gonna bleed for a few days each month. Do this when it happens. You might feel a bit moody. That's basically what you're taught. Or you might crave things, but you're not really taught about how the hormonal fluctuations throughout the rest of the cycle can affect you. And I think you asked this question about how our bodies can change throughout our life. That's certainly to do with our hormones. If we think about as we enter puberty, we start getting an increase in production of the female hormones, estrogen, progesterone, FSH, LH, and we go through puberty, menstruation starts, and that often comes with a change in body shape. We get breast growth, we get females often gain weight on their hips and lower body, and their body shape changes. That's completely normal. Yeah. Then we move into other stages of life, potentially pregnancy, body changes, then changes back, potentially, maybe not. Then you move later in life, metabolism slows down a bit, there's some natural weight gain, and then we reach menopause, where, again, a huge physiological shift, similar to puberty, body changes again. So it's our hormones responsible for those changes throughout our life. And the second thing is, it's not just those landmark periods in our life, it's throughout the month our body may change. So I touched on these fluctuations in hormones, just breaking it down to make sense of this. Day 1 or day 0 of our cycle is the first day of menstruation, and this is the beginning of what we call the follicular phase, which in the textbook terms would last 14 days, and we have high levels of estrogen. Then you ovulate, an egg is released, potentially will get fertilized, and you move into the luteal phase, which is dominated by progesterone. Now, the estrogen and progesterone have really different metabolic effects on our body. So estrogen makes you feel great. It changes the way your energy is utilized. It frees up energy. We feel like we store carbohydrates better, we store more glycogen in our muscle and liver, and essentially it's kind of like Superman hormone. Progesterone, on the other hand, is different. So it's a more catabolic hormone. So it breaks things down, it frees up energy for a potential pregnancy. So you might tap into your carbohydrate stores, your muscle mass, your fat stores. But you also might get symptoms associated with progesterone, like bloating or premenstrual syndrome, and then menstrual cramps. And in the follicular phase, our basal metabolic rate increases by about 300 calories a day. So it'd be quite normal with these shifts in energy metabolism to have associated changes in our body shape. We know that when we store carbohydrates in muscle, it's stored with water. So you might feel a bit more swollen. We know that when you're bloated around the period, I've seen tummies bloat massively where you almost can look pregnant. If it's not uncomfortable and it's not new for you, it can be normal. In some cases, of course, it's not. But I think we need to have more of an appreciation of how our bodies change throughout the month and how we feel at different points in the cycle, because like you said before, we expect to feel the same throughout our lives or look the same throughout our lives. And I think the same applies to, we expect ourselves to show up the same every day of the month, when actually these fluctuations might not allow for that.
Yeah. How effective is it to change? Because I've got one of my friends is a nutritionist, and I've been to a few talks with her, and she's actually taught me a lot about how our bodies fluctuate at different times throughout the cycle. And then I went to these talks, and then I went away and I was trying to match my diet to my luteal phase. And then and I was trying to do week by week, and I should reduce exercise on this. And then sometimes I had more energy than what I was telling myself I should be exercising for. So how effective is it to kind of change your routine or eating or workout habits in correlation to your cycle?
So this is another example of social media and people jumping on the bandwagon a bit too prematurely. There's no robust evidence to say that we should be in a prescriptive way changing things based on the cycle and the fluctuations. And that is true for certainly for exercise and in parts into nutrition too. Where I think it is helpful is not, okay, I'm on my follicular phase, I should be pushing myself, and I'm on my luteal phase, let me step back from exercise or changes in diet. Where I think it's useful is to cut yourself some slack. So if you go to the gym one day, or you go on a run one day, or you just wake up and feel rubbish, in part that may be due to changes in fueling and nutrition, sleep, stress, whatever training load you had for the rest of the week or month. But it also may be due to fluctuations in hormone. And I think it's in those moments where saying, you know what, actually, there's a hormonal part to play here. Maybe I need to just back off and not expect myself to show up in the same way I could last week, because last week I was in a different phase. I think there's the nutrition side of matching what you eat to your menstrual cycle I wouldn't say it's prescriptive. I think, if you are someone who's menstruating, then you might find that with the bleed, you become slightly more iron deficient, and you might think, I need to supplement iron a little bit here. Or you might find that in your coming up to your period, when progesterone levels are higher, your appetite's higher because your basal metabolic rate is increased. You might think, I'm just going to actually let myself eat a bit more when I'm hungry because there's a scientific reason for this. So I think it's useful in those situations, but certainly more research and actual evidence base is needed before we can say, okay, you're on day 4 of your follicular phase, this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
We're not there.
But it is crazy, and I think it is a really interesting topic, because it's great that we are being educated on it now. And like you said, at school you get taught that you're just going to bleed once a month and be moody and eat chocolate, and there's a lot more to it than that. I also think there's something to be said for, you touched on it there, but accepting that your body does change. And I think that reduces a lot of the pressure about how you feel about your body as well, and the bloating or the weight gain or the weight loss or the inconsistency.
I think it's that's a complicated conversation about our attitude to our body, and there's so much kind of psychology behind that. I think I always take myself back to what I said when I opened this conversation about what does healthy really look like, because you can put on a bit of fat and still be really healthy. What I think is one of the most interesting things so many people don't know: when we exercise, all of the benefits of exercise on our blood sugar, on our blood pressure, on our disease risk, our cancer risk, are independent of your BMI. So even if you're not losing weight, all those effects of exercise are still making a difference. And so you can be someone who regularly engages in exercise, but is maybe carrying a bit more body weight than you're used to, and still be really healthy. If you're still eating lots of nutritional food, and you're still getting enough sleep, and you're still, doing the things that bring you happiness in life, I think that's when I feel more okay with my body changing, because I know I'm healthy. And I think that, again, is society's ideal of what healthy is. For some people, naturally run at a slightly bigger body, and that doesn't mean they're not healthy. And similarly, there's some people, as you know, that are showing this like societally slim body that we accept, socially acceptable body of slim, but actually may be really unhealthy, and we don't know what extremes they are doing to get to that. So I think that's one way to accept how your body's changing, is to know truly that you are doing healthy things each day.
Yeah. And I think, healthy to everyone looks completely different.
Yeah.
And I also think it's relevant to the goals that you want to achieve. Like, if you want to lose weight, or you want to gain weight, or you just want to be consistent, or you want to maintain, or you want to feel better, I think a lot of it's about how these things make you feel. And if they're not making you feel the best version of yourself, then you need to change them up.
Yeah, I guess one other angle to that is, yes, there's healthy lifestyle things you can do that make you look a certain way or make you feel good. If you eat a nutritious meal, you're going to feel better in your day than if you don't. But there are so many of our health behaviors and things we can do that are going to benefit our health long term that you just have no way of judging the effect they're having. So they might not necessarily make you feel any better, but science tells us that in 20 years' time, 40 years' time, you're going to be healthier because of it. And that's a really hard message to give out, because people want results. And I think when you say, what is our goal? For me, my goal is to live healthier for longer. So we are an aging population, but are we healthy when we get to that age? I genuinely see patients in clinic who are in their 80s, and I would have told you they're in their 60s. And I always ask them, what is your life like? And they often say, oh, I walk 5 miles a day with the dogs, or, oh, I'm really into cooking and I cook so many things from scratch, or I have other kind of health parameters. And that's for me the goal. It's not losing a few pounds for a summer holiday. It's if I'm going to be alive when I'm older, I want to be healthy.
Yeah. It's playing the long game, isn't it?
Yeah. People don't want to play the long game. People want a short, quick fix. And that's why the fitness and the supplement and the nutrition space is so lucrative and such a big market, because people want to pop a pill, or they want to buy something that is going to make this quick fix to this, and not unfortunately it's not a quick fix. It's a daily practice, and that's why it's so important to make it routine and make easy habits.
Yeah, it's definitely effective. I think the longer, I guess everyone's different, but for me personally, the longer I've done it, the more I've understood, and then the more respect I've had for my body, and the more respect I've had for my routine, and actually the education side of things is super important, because I know that going on a crash diet for 2 weeks and losing 7 pounds or whatever is not healthy for me. But if I do that over a 6-month period of time or whatever, then there's more longevity in it. And so it's, yeah, I do think the more consistent and the more repetitive you are with a healthy approach to movement and diet.
I'm sure I haven't read it, but I'm sure there's probably some study out there that looks at someone who exercises for a short period over years versus someone who does like an intense 3-month gym program. And my guess would be that the small regular exercise or activity has more benefit. So I think that's like my kind of takeaway message is it's way more simple than people will have you believe. And if it's really hard, start smaller.
Yeah, and implement those things into your everyday.
Yeah. And similarly, when we just talked about the women's health thing, it can be a bit overwhelming with all of the information. I guess the same advice applies to how you're consuming information. So start small, learn a little bit about how your body fluctuates in terms of your hormones, or the first step you could do would be just keeping a diary, the easy starting point, because everyone can jot down on their phone notes or in their diary, okay, today I felt like this, and then see if there's patterns, rather than going straight to the big overhaul. Okay, I'm in luteal phase, I'm going to do this.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk quickly about A Vision of Health, which is your podcast.
Yes.
And your platform.
Yes. So Vision of Health is a podcast that I launched at the end of last year. It's essentially anyone's vision of health, and it's really playing on that kind of health looks different on everyone. So the aim of the platform is to bring actually evidence-based factual health content in an easy to implement way. So it's practical health advice that the everyday person can implement in their lives. And each episode has covered a different pillar of our health. So we've had a immunologist on there talking about our immune system. We've had a sleep expert. We've had a nutritionist. We've had a psychiatrist. We've had a life coach. We've had a fertility expert. So many different topics, giving practical advice on how people can actually implement their what they're saying. And again, it goes back to what I said about how everyone has this idea of perfection. And, if you ask an immunologist, how can I support my immune system? Their idea is going to be pretty perfect. Yeah. But the platform actually, and the episodes really cover things that the everyday person can implement. So there's definitely takeaway tips in there for everyone. I am someone who's pretty well read on each of these topics, and I still learn so much. Yeah. So that's the aim of the podcast. And I guess through this season 1, we really learned that health looks different, even for each of these guests who are all in the health space. So I'm really trying to bridge the gap between the scientific evidence base and the everyday person who just wants to live a healthier lifestyle.
Yeah, and I think that's quite refreshing, because we're over-consumed anyway by data and information. We've touched on it throughout, and I think a lot of people who want to be better educated go to platforms of people like yourself who have degrees and are educated to a higher level in health and well-being. But then there's also, we all get served those people who aren't, or who might be sharing tips of their own experience. And so it's nice to have a platform that kind of filters the two.
Yeah. And I really try to kind of sift through all of the rubbish so that listeners don't have to. And I think at the crux of it all is, I'm a 30-year-old woman, and I get it. I get how hard it is. I'm also a consumer. I've also fallen for things. And I think if I can fall for it, and I'm relatively well educated in the health space, gosh, it's hard for the average person. And so I really try and be a relatable source. I know what it's like putting off your smear test booking it in because you've got so much other stuff to do. And I know how hard it is to juggle going to the gym and cook a meal and try and run a business and maintain friendships and relationships. And I really hope that comes across in the podcast and my page, I guess, that it is difficult, but it also is really simple, and we just need to take away the noise and get down to, the cold hard facts, what actually works.
Yeah, I agree. It's really helpful. Okay, so the final question that I kind of ask every guest is, I'll ask you through like the lens of health, but how your tips and advice on people being more themselves and authentic, I guess, or true to themselves through the lens of health.
I think we get much better at this as we get older, don't we? We really learn who we are. I think it's, in terms of the lens of health and living who you really are whilst being your kind of healthiest version of yourself, is my tip would be to write down the things that are important in your life to you, because everyone has different values, and then try and make changes that are healthy. It's like a small incremental change. Even I can make positive changes, but see how it weaves into the things that are important to you. So if it stops you doing one of those core values, like a hobby or socializing or whatever it may be, it's probably not that healthy. And so remaining true to kind of your core values whilst making these changes, that's where you're winning, because that's where it becomes sustainable.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. No, it really does. And I think it is about stop looking externally sometimes. And I think just getting a bit closer to yourself to figure out what it is that makes you feel content and what makes you feel happier and what makes you feel a bit more fulfilled, and doing more of that and less of the stuff that sometimes you maybe think you should be doing. But actually it's not quite right for you.
Yeah. I think as well, being honest with ourselves as to when you are just being maybe a little bit lazy and when you actually, need to cut yourself some slack. I am certainly someone who, when I get stressed, a lot of my healthy habits go out the window. So if I have a lot of work pressures, I might not make the time to cook, or I might not make the time to take my supplements, or I might, cancel on a social thing. And even though I know spending time with my friends or family makes me feel better, and I think you need to be honest with yourself about why you're doing something. So if I wake up in the morning and I can't bother to go to the gym, but it's cold and rainy outside, I ask myself, okay, am I just putting this off because it's cold and rainy, or do I actually need a rest? And similarly, if I'm really stressed, if I'm honest with myself, have I exercised? Have I seen my friends? Have I cooked nutritious meals? Probably no. Okay, what changes can I make? And it takes a little bit of looking at yourself, honestly.